Thanks. Ken I am pleased to present the Defence Forces Amnesty and Immunity Bill 2012 to Dáil Éireann. When this bill was originally published last December, Minister Shatter said that he hoped that through the actions proposed in the bill that it could help put the rest of the concerns of these individuals still alive, who fought for freedom against tyranny with Allied forces during the Second World War. He also expressed the view that the bill might lift the veil for the families of those who have already died. Having had the honour of taking the committee and reporting stages of the bill at Shannon last month, and having heard the very positive contributions from all sides of the House, I fully believe that Minister Shatter's optimism in this regard will be the case. At its peak during Second World War, the Irish Defence Forces had approximately 42,000 serving personnel. Over the course of the war, it is estimated that over 7,000 members of the Defence Forces deserted, many to join with the Allied forces. Of these, some 2,500 personnel returned to the units where they were apprehended and were tried by military tribunal. The remaining personnel, numbering some 5,000, were the subject of dismissal under the Emergency Powers No. 362 Order 1945 of the Defence Forces Temporary Provisions Act 1946. The Emergency Powers Order 1945, which was signed by the then Taoiseach on the 8th of August 1945, provided for automatic dismissal from the Defence Forces of certain deserters and absentees without leave. The order also provided for surrender of pay and allowances and a condition that every person to whom the order applied should be disqualified for 7 years from holding any office or employment remunerated from Central Fund. This is subsequently enacted by the Oireachtas in the Defence Forces Temporary Provisions Bill Act 1946. The effect of the order was to impose a significant hardship on many individuals and families and remove them from the right to be tried for the offences of which they stood accused and to provide a defence against the alleged crime. Many of the individuals were shunned in their communities and many never returned to Ireland. Indeed, it is understood that some of those who were subject of the order had actually died in combat. The majority of the individuals impacted by the order have now passed on, while those still alive are now in the twilight years of their lives. It was against this backdrop that in June 2012, and following a detailed consideration of the issue, the Government concluded that the sacrifice and contribution of those who deserted from the Defence Forces in fight of Allied side to World War should be recognised, while not undermining the requirements of military discipline or in any way condoning their desertion of the time of national emergency. In the context, the Government committed to issuing an apology for the manner in which those members of the Defence Forces who left to join the Allied side during the period 1939 to 1945 were treated after war by the state, and to seek and provide a legal mechanism that will provide an amnesty to those who absented themselves from our Defence Forces for that reason. If these individuals that the legislation I am introducing here today, the Defence Forces Second World War Amnesty and Immunity Bill 2012, seeks to address. The ability of the Defence Forces to maintain the high standards demanded of them requires complete clarity with regard to exercise of command authority, whether at home or abroad. In order to maintain standards and rise to the challenges of military environment and all of the associated tasks, it is important to uphold a chain of command that is clear and unambiguous at all times. Indeed, it is critical to the maintenance of the unit cohesion and operational effectiveness. In that regard, it goes without saying that Defence Forces must retain the power to enforce discipline through its own unique code of discipline with the military justice system. Disciplinary code must be efficient and effective. At all above else, must be fair to the individual. In common with armies throughout the world, Desertion from the Irish Defence Forces is regarded as a very serious offence. It is at the heart of the system of military discipline that when an individual takes the solemn oath at the commencement of his or her career, that he or she can decide to just to up and leave or fail to available to perform duties. And while this is very much the case today, it would especially have been the case at a time when the World War was at war and our troops were on standby to defend our country from invasion. Before elaborating on the bill, I think it is important that I put on the record of the House the fact that the Government recognises the value and importance of the state of essential service given by all those who served in the Defence Forces throughout the period of the Second World War. They performed a crucial duty for the state at a time of national emergency and enormous difficulty. The loyalty of the Defence Forces to the state is indispensable. It is essential to the national interest that members of the Defence Forces do not abandon their duties at any time, especially at a time of crisis, and no responsible government could ever depart from this principle. So I believe it is important that we acknowledge that throughout the period of the Second World War, the vast majority of men choose to stay in the Defence Forces and serve their own country. Their members were engaged in important service in their country, and it is crucial that nothing we do now in any way diminishes or undervalues their loyalty and the service given by them to the state. Having said that, I believe it is accepted by most people today that the majority of those who deserted the Defence Forces during the Second World War and who went on to fight against fascism did not so out of a sense of idealism but a commitment to protect democracies from tyranny and totalitarianism. Had there been a different outcome to the Second World War, there is no reason to believe that the state would have been immune to invasion. In seeking to address the question of desertion during the Second World War, the Government has already acknowledged that the war gave rise to circumstances that were of grave and exceptional. Members of the Defence Forces left their posts at the time to join the Allied side in the fight against tyranny, and together with many thousands of other Irish men and women, these individuals played an important role in defending freedom and democracy. Those who fought on the Allied side also contributed to the protecting the state's sovereignty and independence and our democratic values. I think it will be accepted by all in this House that it is almost 74 years since the outbreak of the Second World War. Our understanding of history has matured. History teaches us lessons that sometimes can only be learnt from the benefit of hindsight. The actions of those taken long ago, for whatever reasons, are not beyond re-evaluation. These actions can now be considered free from the constraints that bound those directly involved at the time and without questioning or revisiting their motivations. As Minister Shatter stated and has previously said, the exploits of men who left the Defence Forces to join the Allies have been politically airbrushed out of contemporary history. But at this time of greater insight and understanding of the shared history and experiences of Ireland and Britain, I believe it is time is right for the role played by those brave volunteer Irish veterans to be recognised and the rejection they experienced understood. From the remove of 2013, it is very hard to imagine the difficult decisions that people made when they consciously decided to leave Ireland to join with the Allied forces during the course of the Second World War. Of course, during that period, Ireland decided to remain neutral, but I think it is safe to say that at the time of anti-British feeling was still running very high. Despite the high level of anti-British feeling and without doubt existed over the period of the Second World War, an estimated 60,000 individually motivated citizens from 26 counties left these shores to serve as volunteers in the British Armed Forces. While at the end of the war, many of those who did choose to fight with the Allies stayed on and sought to build lives for themselves, many more did return to Ireland. There is no doubt that many veterans returning to Ireland at the end of the Second World War were met with grudging acceptance. However, it is also clear that others faced hostility. This was particularly true when the individual was known to have deserted the Defence Forces. For all of them, the honour and celebration which they have been experienced at the end of war in England contrasted sharply with the changed circumstances of their return. There was no flag waving or cheering masses to greet them here. Instead, they were faced with difficulties in seeking either work or social assistance, and indeed many of their countrymen and women remained suspicious towards these individuals long after their return. Before moving into the detailed and specific provisions of the bill, I think it is important that, just as Minister Shatter did during the second stage debate in Shannon, I re-emphasise that government does not condone desertion and fully recognises, values and respects the contribution of all those who stood by their post with the Defence Forces and pledged their lives to defend this state's integrity and sovereignty against any of all the aggressors. In any consideration of the matter, we must also bear in mind the principle that these decisions cannot be left to the individual desertion of individual soldiers on active service, and also soldiers must accept that there are consequences for desertion. The provisions of the bill. I will now move on to the specific provisions of the bill. Section 1 outlines the definitions for the purpose of the bill. Section 2 provides for an amnesty for members of the Defence Forces who deserted, who were absent without leave during the course of the Second World War and who subsequently served with forces fighting on the Allied side and in that war, and who were dismissed from the Defence Forces by the emergency powers of 1945, B, were convicted of desertion, of being absent without leave, or were liable to be prosecuted for desertion or being absent without leave. Deputies will have noticed that the bill provides for amnesty for those convicted of desertion or being absent without leave, rather than a pardon, as was originally envisaged by the government. This change has been made for technical reasons and is in line with legal advice provided to me during the drafting of the process by the Attorney General, and to the effect that pardon would require that each case be individually processed, a situation that would clearly not be possible in practical terms. Section 3 provides an immunity for prosecution for members of the Defence Forces who deserted or were absent without leave during the course of the Second World War and who subsequently served forces fighting on the Allied side in that war. Section 4 provides that no right, liability or any cause of action shall arise resulting from enactment. Section 4 also provides that the amnesty being provided in Section 2 will not have the effect of a pardon under Article 13.6 of the Constitution. Section 5 provides for the short title of the bill. I am satisfied that the bill was drafted fully meets the government's commitment to deal in a positive way with the issue of those who deserted our defence forces to join the Allied forces during the course of the Second World War. And it does so in a way that does not expose the state to any liability in respect of those individuals. I also believe that the bill, if this bill is enacted, it will send an important message to those surviving members and relatives of those who have since passed away. That message, you can be proud of your contribution, of your relatives' contribution in the fight for freedom. Indeed, it is more than that. As we look at the commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the commencement of the Great War and the 75th anniversary of the World War II in 2014, and the remembrance of all those who served and who died in these conflicts, those surviving or the relatives of those who have since passed on can proudly commemorate the sacrifices they made during the very difficult time, not only in Irish history, but the history of Europe and the wider world. I am very pleased to submit this legislation for consideration of the House, and I look forward and with anticipation of hearing the views and contributions of all deputies in both government and opposition in their deliberation and reflections on this bill. I commend the bill to Dáil Éireann.